Dr. Tamsin Voss had the kind of charm that could sigh your milk. If you were lucky, she'd spare you a glance before reminding you that life was just a series of unfortunate events waiting to happen. Today was no different, except it was on Mars, in a quarantine zone, and she was staring at a human with a slug crawling out of his ear. "It's just like college," Tamsin muttered, nudging the toe of her boot against the twitching form of patient zero, only with more mucus. She scratched at the back of her neck, where the Martian dust had mingled with sweat, creating a particularly annoying kind of itch. Beside her, Dr. Ivan Kyrie squinted through the visor of his helmet, looking every bit like a man who regretted all his life choices leading up to this point. "I miss Earth." "Yeah. Well, Earth probably doesn't miss you," replied Tamsin, clicking her tongue against her teeth. "Come on, let's get this over with." The quarantine zone was a beauty, all rust-red and sprawling infrastructure that had seen better days, back when people still believed Mars colonization was a good idea. They'd tossed the infected here like old clothes, out of sight and out of mind, hoping that someone else would deal with it. That someone else was Tamsin and her ragtag team of misfits, who were less of a scientific task force and more of a cosmic joke. "I heard these parasites give people powers," Ivan said, trying to sound hopeful. "Oh sure," Tamsin snorted. "The power to leak fluids from every orifice. Sign me up." They entered the facility, which smelled of antiseptic and despair. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly pallor on the walls. Tamsin wondered if they were saving on electricity or just trying to set the mood. Probably both. "You're late," a voice barked as they stepped into the lab, where the rest of the team was already assembled around a table cluttered with equipment that looked like it had been borrowed from a 1970s horror movie set. "Nice to see you too, Barker," Tamsin replied, rolling her eyes. Barker was the kind of guy who'd correct your grammar mid-heart attack. He was also the closest thing they had to security, which was saying something. "We've got a fresh one," Barker said, pointing to a containment pod in the corner. It was a glass coffin housing a woman who seemed blissfully unaware of the world outside. Or maybe she was just dead. Hard to tell these days. "All right, let's crack her open," Tamsin said with the enthusiasm of someone about to defuse a bomb using only a toothpick. "Ivan, you're on standby with the sedative. Barker, try not to shoot anyone this time." Barker grunted, which Tamsin took as a sign of grudging cooperation. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of sterilized air that smelled faintly of desperation. The woman inside stirred, blinking groggily as if she'd been rudely awakened from a particularly good dream. "Hey there," Tamsin said, smiling in a way that made children cry. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a Martian sandstorm," the woman mumbled, her voice raspy. "Must be Tuesday then," Ivan quipped, readying the sedative just in case things went sideways, which, given their luck, was a certainty. "Can you tell us your name?" Tamsin asked, glancing at the monitors that were beeping away like an enthusiastic percussion section. "Hannah," the woman replied, her eyes darting around as if searching for something familiar in the sea of unfamiliar faces. "Well, Hannah, you're in a quarantine zone on Mars because of a little incident," Tamsin explained, waving a hand as if shooing away an annoying fly. "You're not contagious anymore, but we need to do some tests." Hannah nodded, her expression somewhere between dazed and confused. "What happened to me?" "Long story short, you got cozy with an alien parasite," Tamsin said, flipping through the charts with the enthusiasm of a sloth on sedatives. "It might have given you some new abilities. Or it might just be renting space in your brain." "Oh," Hannah said, as if realizing she'd won a lottery she hadn't entered. "What kind of abilities?" "We're not entirely sure," Ivan admitted, stepping in to fill the awkward silence. "But don't worry, as soon as we find out you'll be the first to know." "Second," Tamsin corrected. "We have to tell the boss first." "So I might be a superhero?" Hannah asked, a flicker of hope lighting up her eyes. "Or a host for an alien invasion," Barker deadpanned, crossing his arms. "Always the optimist," Tamsin remarked dryly, shooting Barker a look that could melt steel. Anyway, let's focus on the upside. Maybe you'll discover you can fly. Or, I don't know, make a killer souffle. Hannah managed a weak smile, the kind people give when they're not sure if they are part of a joke. She settled back into the pod, eyes drifting shut as the sedative took hold. Right. Keep an eye on her and let me know if she starts glowing or something, Tamsin said, turning her attention back to the stack of reports on her desk. You think we'll ever find out what these parasites really want? Ivan asked, peering over her shoulder. Not if we keep working with this budget, Tamsin replied, waving a hand at the ancient computer terminal that wheezed more than it whirred. But it beats being a lawyer back on Earth. You were a lawyer, Ivan said, eyes wide with surprise. Why do you think I'm so good at spotting bullshit? Tamsin smirked, flipping a page with a flick of her wrist. Now focus. We've got a bunch more of these alien slugs to study and not enough time. The Iors dragged on, filled with the kind of tedious work that made you wish for a swift asteroid impact. The lab was a symphony of beeps and whirs, punctuated by the occasional curse or groan. Tamsin felt the weight of each passing second like an anvil tied to her soul. Hey Tamsin, you ever think about just leaving? Ivan asked during a rare moment of quiet, his voice barely a whisper. Every damn day, she replied without missing a beat. But then I remember, where else can I play mad scientist without getting arrested? Fair point, Ivan conceded, stifling a yawn. The door slid open with a hiss, and in walked Dr. Arjun Patel, the kind of man who would be late to his own funeral. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder, he said with a grin that suggested he knew exactly how bad his joke was. You're just in time for the party, Tamsin replied, gesturing toward a new set of scans on the monitor. Check this out. Looks like patient 17 is showing some unusual brain activity. Arjun leaned in, squinting at the screen. Unusual how? Unusual like he's gone from playing tic-tac-toe to three-dimensional chess, Tamsin said, tapping the screen with a pen. See these patterns? No normal human brain should light up like that. So he's either a genius or about to explode, Arjun speculated, rubbing his chin. Could be both, Ivan chimed in, his sarcasm as thick as Martian dust. Tamsin pushed back from the desk, stretching her arms over her head. I need some air, and by air I mean whatever passes for it on this rock. She left the bickering duo behind and stepped out into the hallway, where the lighting was marginally less oppressive. The quarantine zone, with its maze-like corridors and constant hum of machines, was enough to drive anyone a little mad. Tamsin leaned against the wall, staring out the small window at the barren Martian landscape. Red dust storms danced in the distance, angry and restless. You know, they say this place used to have water, a voice said from behind her. Tamsin turned to see Sophia, the team's resident cynic and engineer, leaning against the opposite wall, arms crossed. Yeah, well, now it's just got us. Lucky Mars, Sophia replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. What brings you to my little corner of hell? Just needed a break from Ivan's conspiracy theories, Sophia replied, rolling her eyes. He's convinced the parasites are a government plot, Tamsin snorted. If they are, it's the most incompetent plot I've ever seen. The two women stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the Martian world pressing down on them. You think we'll ever get out of here? Sophia asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. I hope not, Tamsin said, surprising herself. Because if we do, it means we've either cured this thing or everyone else is dead. Sophia laughed, a sound that was more bitter than sweet. Comforting. I do my best, Tamsin replied, turning away from the window. Come on, let's see if Arjun hasn't blown up the lab. They made their way back down the corridor, navigating the labyrinthine halls with the kind of ease that only came from months of practice. The facility was a testament to human ingenuity or lack thereof. You know, Sophia said as they rounded a corner, if these parasites do give people powers, maybe we should start thinking about a name for our team. Something catchy. Like what? The Martian Misfits. Not bad, Sophia admitted with a shrug. Could be marketable. I'm sure there's a reality show host out there who'd love the idea, Tamsin said as they reached the lab door. Inside, the chaos had resumed, with monitors blaring and equipment scattered like debris after a storm. Ivan and Arjun were in the midst of a heated debate over some data points, their voices rising and falling like waves. "All right, kids, playtime's over," Tamsin announced, clapping her hands together. "Let's get back to work. We've got a whole planet of mysteries to solve and only a couple of lifetimes to do it." The team settled back into their routine, each member focused on their tasks as the minutes ticked by. In the corner, Hannah's monitor beeped steadily, a reminder that even amidst the madness, life went on. As Tamsin turned back to her work, a small smile tugged at her lips. Mars might have been a nightmare, but it was her nightmare, and for now, that was enough. Tamsin flipped through the stack of reports, each one more depressing than the last. The parasites were doing what parasites do best, wrecking everything. "Looks like patient 17 decided to reshuffle his neurons into a Picasso," she muttered, rubbing at the growing headache behind her eyes. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Ivan asked, leaning over her shoulder, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Well, it depends," Tamsin replied. "If you're into abstract art, you're in for a treat. Otherwise, I'd suggest keeping a safe distance." "Safe distance." "In this place," Ivan snorted. "Closest we get to safety is when we run out of coffee. Hope you're ready for a caffeine withdrawal apocalypse." Then, Sophia chimed in from across the room, fiddling with a piece of equipment that looked like it might explode just for kicks. Arjun, meanwhile, was engrossed in his own world of chaos, muttering to himself as he poked at the controls of a particularly temperamental scanner. "Can someone tell me why this thing has more mood swings than a hormonal teenager? Probably because it's been here longer than you," Tamsin quipped, not looking up from her screen. "Old tech is like an old dog, stubborn and a bit senile." The lab door swung open with a creak that sounded suspiciously like a scream for help. Barker shuffled in, his face set in a permanent scowl. "Got another one in transit," he grumbled. "Hopefully not another Picasso waiting to happen." "Guess we're the only artists Martian quarantine's ever going to see," Ivan said, scratching the back of his neck. "Too bad we can't sell this stuff in a gallery." "Right, I'll call Sotheby's," Tamsin said dryly. "See if they're interested in brain scans and bodily fluids." "Any chance they pay in real coffee?" Sophia asked, raising an eyebrow. "We're not that lucky," Barker replied, placing a new stack of data tablets on a cluttered desk. The tablets teetered, threatening to crash to the floor like everything else in their lives. "So what's the latest on the chaos scale?" Arjun asked, looking up from his malfunctioning scanner. Tamsin sighed, glancing at the reports. "Our Lady Hannah's stable, which is about the best news we've got, but 17's brain activity is heading for unpredictable, and by unpredictable, I mean he might decide he's the next Martian overlord by lunchtime." "Can't wait to see the inauguration," Ivan said, folding his arms. "What do you reckon the speech will be?" "I promise to make Mars great again." "Probably just a lot of incoherent screaming," Sophia suggested. "That's politics for you," Tamsin agreed. 2 hours later, the lab was a flurry of activity, or as close as it ever got in the oppressive Martian atmosphere. The team gathered around the central console, reviewing the latest data streams with varying degrees of interest and dread. "So what are we looking at?" Barker asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. The feeling was mutual. "Patient 17's brain activity is off the charts," Arjun said, gesturing at the screen. "And I mean way off. He's basically rewriting the plot." "More like the plot's rewriting him," Sophia added, eyes scanning the data. "Can we stabilize him?" Barker asked, his voice edged with a rare hint of concern. "Not without more resources," Tamsin admitted. "And unless one of you's hiding a state-of-the-art lab in your back pocket, we're fresh out." "Guess we're just winging it then," Ivan said, trying not to sound too defeated. "Because that's worked so well in the past. The parasites are enhancing certain capabilities, but it seems completely random," Tamsin explained, pointing at a series of graphs. "Some people get smarter, some get stronger, and some just leak." Leaking's always a hit, Sophia noted. Who doesn't love a good fountain show? Well, whatever's happening with 17, it's big, Arjun said, his fingers dancing over the console with practiced ease. We need to keep a close watch. You mean like the kind of watch that involves not getting killed in the process? Ivan asked, shooting a look around the room. Exactly that kind, Tamsin confirmed. So everyone keep your hazmat suits handy, Barker stated like a disappointed school principal. And for God's sake, don't provoke anyone who looks like they've had a bad day. On Mars, that's everyone, Ivan sighed, including us. As the team dispersed to their respective stations, the atmosphere in the lab shifted from tense to charged. It was like waiting for a storm that might just blow them away or simply pass by with a light drizzle. Tamsin watched the data flicker across the screen, wondering if 17 would end up as another tragic footnote in the saga of Mars or something more. Maybe he'd become the first human-turned parasite superhero, though the odds of that were as low as Earth's appreciation for Martian quarantine zones. Think he might do something stupid? Ivan asked, peering at 17's vitals. Isn't that the definition of being human? Tamsin replied. Doing stupid stuff and hoping it all works out. Not the most encouraging outlook, Ivan pointed out, adjusting his glasses. You came to Mars for encouragement, Tamsin snorted, incredulous. You need to work on your life choices, Ivan. Meanwhile, the rest of the lab buzzed with a quiet intensity. They were understaffed, underfunded, and probably under some cosmic curse judging by their luck. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was stumbling through chaos with a stubbornness that bordered on insanity. And speaking of insanity, Patient 17 had decided to add a little more spice to their lives. His brain activity spiked, the monitors flashing warnings like a disco light show on speed. If this was Mars' version of a party, it was the kind you didn't want to be invited to. Here we go, Ivan said, reaching for the emergency sedative. Think he'll settle for a nap? Only one way to find out, Tamsin replied, eyes locked on the screen. The first signs of trouble were subtle, a twitch here, a jolt there, but it quickly escalated. Patient 17, previously a peaceful lump, was now thrashing like a fish out of Martian water. Barker sprang into action, adrenaline cutting through his usual lethargy. Okay, everyone stay back. We don't know what he's capable of. You mean besides redecorating the lab in bodily fluids? Sophia asked, stepping back. You always know how to paint a picture, Arjun said, rolling his eyes. Part of my charm, Sophia shrugged. 17's eyes flew open, and for a moment they seemed to flicker with something otherworldly. A pulse of energy rippled through the room, sending a shiver down Tamsin's spine. It was as if the very air had changed, crackling with tension. Okay, 17, Tamsin said, trying to keep her voice steady. Let's not do anything drastic. 17, however, had other ideas. His limbs jerked violently and the restraints groaned in protest. It was like watching a puppet show where the puppets had decided to revolt. How long until the sedative kicks in? Barker asked, his finger hovering over the containment field controls. Any second now, Ivan replied, though he didn't sound convinced. A metallic groan echoed through the lab as one of the restraints snapped, sending a shiver of panic through the team. All right, that's it, Barker said, slamming his palm on the console, activating the containment field. A shimmering barrier enveloped 17, humming with energy. For a moment, 17's movement stilled, his eyes narrowing in confusion. Then, as if sensing the challenge, he renewed his efforts, the containment field crackling under the strain. Well, this is going well, Tamsin muttered, watching the spectacle with a mix of awe and horror. Anyone got popcorn? Or a better idea, Ivan added, his expression grim. Sophia glanced at the monitor, eyes widening. Tamsin, look at the brain activity. It's like he's building up to something. Like what? A grand finale, Arjun asked, leaning closer. More like a grand explosion, Sophia corrected, pointing at the screen. If his brain activity keeps escalating, we could be looking at a serious meltdown. Love a good meltdown, Tamsin said, sarcasm lacing her words. Really livens up the day. "So what's the plan?" Barker asked, fingers twitching on the console. "Keep him contained," Tamsin said, her mind racing. "And hope that sedative kicks in before he does something that'll land us all on the news." "You mean the obituaries," Ivan corrected. "Same difference," Tamsin replied, a wry smile on her lips. As they watched, 17's thrashing began to slow, the sedative finally taking effect. The containment field held strong and 17's movements gradually ceased, his eyes fluttering shut. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Sophia said, relaxing her stance. "I'll take anticlimactic over catastrophic any day," Arjun said, wiping his brow. "At least he didn't explode," Ivan noted, the relief evident in his voice. "Yet," Tamsin cautioned, ever the pessimist. The lab settled back into a tense quiet, the team exchanging wary glances. They were no strangers to chaos, but this was a new level of madness. The parasites were changing the game, and it was unclear if humanity was winning or losing. "So, what now?" Barker asked, eyeing the containment field warily. "Now we figure out what 17's brain was trying to do," Tamsin said, her determination renewed. "And hope we're not too late to stop it." "Hope's a dangerous thing," Ivan mused, watching the monitors. "Yeah, well, so's Mars," Tamsin replied. "But here we are." And as the lab buzzed with activity once more, Tamsin couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Mars had its secrets, and the parasites were only the tip of the iceberg. Whatever came next, they'd have to face it head-on, armed with nothing but sarcasm and a stubborn refusal to give up. The universe had thrown them a curveball, and it was up to them to hit it out of the park, or at least avoid getting hit themselves. "Doctor," Tamsin Voss squinted at the data tablet, which was sputtering just as badly as her faith in humanity. The screen flickered and stalled like a drunk trying to start a fight it couldn't finish. "Bloody old tech," she muttered, giving it a sharp tap that achieved absolutely nothing. "Yeah, that'll fix it," Ivan Kyrie said, peering over her shoulder with the look of someone who'd rather be in a muggy earth bar getting yelled at by a stranger. "Try sweet-talking it next." "Maybe it's into that sort of thing. Are you volunteering?" Tamsin shot back, but her heart wasn't in it. There were bigger problems than malfunctioning tech, like the enhanced humans who'd decided Mars was the perfect spot for a hostile takeover, because dealing with parasitic fountains hadn't been enough. "Anything new on our friendly neighborhood superhumans?" Ivan asked, nodding to the reports Sophia was pretending to read as she sipped her tasteless coffee substitute. "They're still out there," Sophia replied, setting down her mug, "and I'm all out of caffeine. So if they want to attack, now would be the perfect time. I'm feeling especially homicidal." "Excellent." "Maybe you can kill them with kindness," Arjun suggested, the sarcasm as thick as the Martian dust. "Or maybe they'll slip in the puddles of optimism I'm leaking," Sophia responded, rolling her eyes. "Seriously, what's their deal? Same as everyone else's," Ivan said, shrugging. "Power, control, and probably a really twisted sense of destiny." He glanced at Tamsin. "Any chance we can talk them down?" "Sure, if they're willing to negotiate." In grunts and screams, Tamsin replied. "Our last attempt at diplomacy didn't go great, remember." "Not my fault they were allergic to common sense," Ivan grumbled. Meanwhile, Barker slammed another stack of data tablets onto the table, each one threatening to collapse under the weight of unread reports. "I've got more of these useless things. Just in case you needed more bad news." "Great, because that's exactly what we're lacking," Tamsin replied dryly. "Why don't you chuck them into the containment field and see if they'll merge into a super tablet?" "Don't tempt me," Barker said, though the idea clearly had appeal. "I'll take that as a no on the negotiation front," Arjun said, his hands busily adjusting the scanner that seemed to have a vendetta against accurate readings. "So what's the plan?" "Wait for those enhanced loons to knock down the door and say hello." "Plan is don't die," Tamsin said, leaning back in her chair. "Plan B is see Plan A." "Wow, there's a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel," Ivan remarked, shaking his head. "Got a better one?" Tamsin challenged, though she already knew the answer. No one did. This was Mars, where hope came to be crushed like a tin can in a hydraulic press. Before Ivan could respond, the airlock hissed open, and a figure stumbled in, a Martian survivor, judging by the look of panic and grime. "They're coming," he gasped, eyes wide with terror as if he'd seen the Grim Reaper in the flesh. "Who's coming?" Barker demanded, already moving toward the emergency protocols. If there was one thing the man excelled at, it was managing a crisis with the enthusiasm of a cat being dragged to a bath. The enhanced ones, the newcomer panted, clutching his side. "They tore through the last outpost. We barely got away. Just what we needed," Tamsin muttered, feeling the migraine creeping up to join the party. "More guests. Did you send out invites, Ivan?" "Must have slipped my mind," Ivan replied, his eyes narrowing. "So, what's the plan?" "Like I said, don't die," Tamsin replied, her mind racing. "Sophia, how's our security system?" "About as reliable as a wet match," Sophia responded, not bothering to hide her disdain. "We might slow them down, but if they are enhanced, then we're screwed," Arjun finished, pulling up a schematic on the console. "But we can make it as difficult as possible for them. Maybe give them a reason to think twice. Or at least buy us enough time to figure out what the hell we're supposed to do next," Ivan added, checking the charge on his sidearm. "Because I'm not keen on being a Martian statistic." "None of us are," Tamsin said, her gaze sweeping the room. "All right, let's lock down what we can and keep our eyes open. If they break through, we need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Barker asked, his voice tinged with resignation. "For anything," Tamsin answered, though it felt like a lie. They were scientists, not soldiers. But on Mars, the line between the two blurred more often than not. As they set to work reinforcing the lab's defenses, the tension in the room rose like a pressure cooker on the verge of blowing its top. It was the kind of atmosphere that turned friends into enemies and enemies into something worse. "Think they'll come in guns blazing?" Sophia asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and dread. "If they've got guns, I'll be impressed," Ivan said. "Arms dealing isn't exactly a booming industry out here. Maybe they'll just beat us to death with their egos," Arjun suggested, earning a snort from Barker. "Wouldn't be the first time," Tamsin muttered, glancing at the containment field where 17 lay unconscious. The sedative had done its job, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was the least of their worries. If the enhanced humans broke in, they might decide 17 was a prize worth taking, or worse, a weapon worth using. "Think they've got a plan?" Ivan asked, checking his weapon again. "Or are they just winging it like us?" "Probably winging it," Tamsin replied. "But they've got the edge. We need to be smart." "Smart's overrated," Barker said, sliding a panel into place. "Surviving's where it's at." "By any means necessary," Sophia agreed, her expression hardening. As the team worked, the oppressive Martian silence outside seemed to deepen, the very air buzzing with anticipation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of their depth. But if they were going down, they'd at least make it one hell of a fight. "Here's hoping they are allergic to science," Ivan said, casting a glance at the equipment they'd rigged into makeshift defenses. "Because we've got plenty of that." "And sarcasm," Sophia added, a grim smile on her lips. "We're basically armed to the teeth with it." "Let's see if that's enough," Tamsin said, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. As the minutes ticked by, the lab fell into a tense silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than any shout, the kind that spoke of impending doom. They were on the brink of something dangerous, something that might just change Mars forever, or end them before they even had a chance to adapt. The lights flickered, a warning that the power grid was struggling under the strain. Tamsin glanced at the monitors, each one a reminder of their precarious situation. They were balancing on a knife's edge, and all it would take was one wrong move to tip them into the abyss. But before they could consider their next steps, the alarms blared, jolting them all into action. The enhanced humans had arrived, and they were making their presence known with a vengeance. "Okay, everyone, this is it," Tamsin said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Remember the plan. "Don't die," Ivan echoed, a determined glint in his eyes. "Don't die," the others repeated, a mantra as much as a command. The crash of the outer door being breached echoed through the lab, a sound that resonated with finality. The enhanced humans were here and they weren't waiting for an invitation. It was do or die, and Tamsin wasn't inclined to choose the latter. "Let's give them a warm welcome," she said, her grip tightening on her weapon. And with that, the lab descended into chaos, their fragile sanctuary shattered by the storm of battle. Mars was a harsh mistress, and she was about to test them all in ways they'd never imagined. But if there was one thing Tamsin's team excelled at, it was defying the odds, even when those odds were stacked a mile high. "Remember, folks," Ivan called out over the din, "we didn't come to Mars to make friends." "Good thing, considering the company," Sophia shouted back. "Let's just hope we're enough of a pain in the ass to make them think twice," Arjun added, a wild grin on his face. And as the first of the enhanced humans broke through, Tamsin knew one thing for sure: win or lose, they'd make sure Mars remembered their names. Because if they couldn't survive, at least they'd make damn sure the others wouldn't forget them either. The lab's air, already thin and stale, now carried a new aroma, impending doom with a hint of desperation. Tamsin wiped a trickle of sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, her focus firmly on the monitors. Ivan was fiddling with his sidearm, his face a mask of determination or resignation. Hard to tell with him sometimes. "Think they'll bring souvenirs?" Sophia asked, her voice as dry as Mars itself. "If they do, hope it's better than that coffee crap," Ivan replied, squinting at the door. The alarms continued to blare, a siren song of chaos. Tamsin leaned over the console, her mind racing through the previous data they'd collected on the parasites. There had to be a pattern, a smoking gun that could save their skins. "Barker, you getting anything on the scanners?" she shouted, trying to be heard over the cacophony. "Nothing but static and false hope," Barker shot back, the sarcasm practically dripping from his words. "I'd blame the tech, but I think it's just as sick of this shit as we are." "Fantastic," Tamsin muttered, her eyes scanning the lines of data. Somewhere in this mess was a clue, a key to unlocking the madness surrounding them. But right now, all she had was a headache that could rival a Martian dust storm. "Hey, what's this?" Ivan said, leaning closer to one of the screens. He tapped the glass like it might somehow start talking back. "Is that a pattern, or am I just desperate for good news?" Barker ambled over, giving the screen a cursory glance. "Looks like something all right. A pattern in the parasite activity, or the universe flipping us the bird," Sophia added helpfully. "No, wait," Tamsin interrupted, her eyes darting across the screen. "It's not random. There's definitely something here. See how they're clustering?" "Yeah, like teenage boys around a video screen," Ivan quipped. Tamsin frowned, ignoring him as she scrubbed through the data. "They're reacting to something. Maybe electromagnetic fields or radiation levels. If we can figure out what it is, we might have a way to control them," Arjun finished, appearing beside her like a ghost in a bad mood. "Or, at the very least, steer them away from us." "Great," Barker said, rolling his eyes. Who knew getting a doctorate in dying would pay off eventually? "But," Tamsin continued, undeterred, "if we can isolate what triggers them, we might be able to use it against the enhanced humans, turn the parasites into a weapon." "I like weapons," Sophia murmured, fiddling with her console, "especially ones that don't involve me getting shot at." "Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves," Ivan cautioned. "First, we need to confirm the pattern and figure out what's causing it. Then we can start thinking about weaponizing it." "Can we do it before or after those enhanced psychos break down the door?" Barker asked, his hands working on reinforcing the lab's entrance with whatever scraps he could find. "Preferably before," Tamsin replied, her gaze still fixed on the screen. "Arjun, help me analyze this. If we're onto something, we'll need to move fast." "Fast is my middle name," Arjun drawled sarcastically, though the speed at which he moved belied his words as he joined Tamsin at the console. As they worked, the clamor from outside intensified, the sound of fists, or worse, hammering against metal. A reminder that time was as precious as their dwindling resources, and just as slippery. "Think they'll get tired and go home?" Ivan asked, checking his weapon one more time. "Not unless they're here on a baccalaureate party," Barker retorted. "In my experience, those never end well." They worked in tense silence, the only sounds the beeping of the machines and the thudding against the door. Tamsin and Arjun's fingers danced over the controls, coaxing information from the reluctant systems. The pattern was there, just out of reach, teasing them like a cruel joke. Come on," Tamsin muttered, her frustration mounting. "What are you hiding?" "Your sanity, probably," Ivan suggested. Then, just as her patience reached its breaking point, the data clicked into place. Tamsin felt a thrill of triumph, tempered by the reality of their situation. "Got it. It's the magnetic fields. They're reacting to spikes in magnetism." "Great," Sophia said. "How the hell does that help us?" "If we can create a localized field, we might be able to repel them, or at least confuse them enough to buy us some time," Arjun explained, already pulling up the schematics for their equipment. "Repel them, like bug spray?" Ivan asked, a sardonic grin on his face. "Exactly," Tamsin replied. "But we'll need to adjust the frequency and intensity. Too much and we could blow ourselves to kingdom come," Barker finished. "Got it. Nothing ventured, nothing exploded, right? Let's just make sure we're not the ones who end up as Martian roadkill," Tamsin said, already configuring the necessary settings. "Everyone get ready. If this works, we might have a shot." "And if it doesn't?" Sophia asked. "Then we'll at least go out with a bang," Ivan said, his voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. With the plan in place, they moved into position, the lab a flurry of activity. Tamsin's heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline mixing with fear in a cocktail she'd rather not have tasted. But here they were, about to gamble not just with their lives, but with the future of Mars itself. "Okay, on my mark," Tamsin instructed, her voice cutting through the din. 3, 2, 1, the door burst open, a cacophony of metal and fury. Enhanced humans poured in, their faces twisted in determination. But Tamsin was ready. She hit the switch, sending a pulse of energy through the air, a magnetic wave designed to disrupt the parasites and hopefully their attackers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then chaos erupted. The enhanced humans faltered, confusion writ large across their faces as the parasites reacted, their movements erratic and unpredictable. "Seems like they didn't get the memo," Ivan shouted, taking advantage of their disarray to fire off a couple of shots. "It's working," Tamsin yelled, relief and disbelief mingling in her voice. "Keep it up." The lab was a whirlwind of sound and movement, each of them locked in a battle that felt as much about survival as it did about making a point. Mars wasn't a place for the faint-hearted, and they were proving it one desperate action at a time. As the enhanced humans struggled to regroup, Tamsin realized that the tide was turning. Slowly, but surely, they were gaining the upper hand. But she knew better than to celebrate too soon. It wasn't over until it was over, and on Mars it was never really over. "I think they're getting the picture," Arjun shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. "Yeah, that we're not the pushover they thought," Sophia added, a fierce grin on her face. But just as it seemed they might achieve a much-needed victory, the power flickered, a warning light flashing ominously on the console. The system was overloading, straining under the demand of the magnetic field. "Tamsin, we've got a problem," Barker shouted, his eyes wide. "I see it," Tamsin replied, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to let up, not when they were so close. But if the system failed, they'd be right back where they started, except worse off. "Can we reroute?" Ivan suggested, his tone urgent. "Not enough time," Arjun said. "We need a fallback plan now." Tamsin hesitated, her mind torn between options. "All right, here's what we'll do. Barker, set up the secondary generator. Sophia, keep an eye on the power levels. Ivan and Arjun, prepare to switch to manual control if needed." "Manual control?" Sophia repeated, incredulous. "You mean like with our hands?" "Think of it as experiential learning," Ivan quipped, moving to get into position. They worked with frantic precision, each of them aware that time was slipping through their fingers like sand. The enhanced humans had regrouped, their initial confusion giving way to a renewed determination. But Tamsin and her team had something they didn't, a plan born of desperation and sheer stubbornness. "Power levels are stabilizing," Sophia reported, her voice a lifeline amidst the chaos. "We might just pull this off." "Might" being the operative word, Barker said, his hands steady as he worked the controls. Tamsin felt a flicker of hope, the kind that was dangerous to entertain but impossible to ignore. They were scientists, not soldiers, but in that moment they were something more. Survivors. Fighters. A last line of defense against a world determined to break them. The enhanced humans surged forward, a final, desperate push to break through their defenses. But Tamsin's team held firm, their resolve as unyielding as the Martian rock beneath their feet. "Let's finish this," Tamsin said, her voice strong and clear. "For Mars." For us. They unleashed everything they had, a storm of energy and determination that swept through the lab, driving their enemies back. It was a gamble, a last-ditch effort to reclaim control of their lives and their futures. And as the dust settled, the enhanced humans retreating, Tamsin knew that they'd done it. They'd won this battle against all odds, but the war was far from over. Mars was still a harsh mistress, and their victory was a fleeting thing like breath on glass. But for now, it was enough. They were enough. And that, Tamsin thought as she surveyed the aftermath, was something worth fighting for. "It worked," Ivan said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. "Yeah," Tamsin replied, exhaustion creeping into her bones. "But let's not make a habit of it." "Agreed," Barker said, leaning back against the wall. "I'm all for living to fight another day. And maybe finding a bar," Sophia added, her smile weary but genuine. "I could really use a drink." "On Mars?" Arjun asked, his sarcasm returning in full force. "Good luck with that." As they gathered their wits and assessed the damage, Tamsin allowed herself a moment of pride. Against all odds, they'd held their ground. And while the future was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. They'd face it together as a team. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The air in the lab was thick with anticipation, and the kind of staleness that only came from recycled air and desperation. The recent skirmish with the enhanced humans felt like a temporary reprieve rather than a victory, and everyone was acutely aware of it. "Well, that was fun," Sophia said, dusting off her hands like she'd just finished a shift in a particularly brutal kitchen. "Who's up for another round of How Screwed Are We?" "I'd say we're playing the advanced version," Ivan replied, reloading his weapon with a practiced ease that suggested he'd rather be not doing it at all. "And the answer's always the same. Very." "Barker, how's that door holding up?" Tamsin asked, her focus now split between the monitors and the improvised barricade. "Like a promise from a politician," Barker answered, giving it a skeptical kick. "It'll give out eventually, just no idea when." "Comforting," Arjun muttered, glancing at the scanner that was about as reliable as a 2-credit fortune teller. "And these things have about as much life in them as a Martian sitcom." "Great, because I was really hoping for more static and less useful data," Tamsin said, sarcasm dripping from every word. Outside, the growls and shouts of the enhanced humans intensified. They were regrouping, probably getting ready for another glorious attempt at playing Who Wants to Be a Conqueror. And judging by the noise levels, they seemed determined to make it the final episode. "We need another plan," Tamsin said, turning away from the useless array of gadgets that had clearly chosen the worst time to unionize against functionality. "Something they won't see coming, like a surprise birthday party," Ivan suggested, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Sure, let's pop out a cake with guns blazing," Sophia said, rolling her eyes. "Wouldn't be the worst idea," Arjun chimed in. "But we're out of eggs and flour, so unless someone's smuggling a bakery, we're screwed on that front too." "And here I was hoping for a cake," Ivan said wistfully. "But seriously, folks, what's the next move?" Tamsin rubbed her temples, the weight of the last few hours pressing down on her like a particularly insistent hangover. "The parasites are evolving. We saw it in their reactions. They're adapting faster than we can keep up." "Nature's little way of telling us to get lost," Barker said, fiddling with a piece of equipment that had seen better days. "Nice of it, isn't it? Everything on this planet wants us dead," Sophia replied, looking at the flickering lights like they were personally responsible for their predicament. "Mars included. It's like the universe left a no-human sign out and we missed it." "Clearly," Arjun said, examining a data tablet like it might bite him. "So, any chance we can adapt faster than the parasitic plague that wants to eat us for breakfast?" "It's simple," Tamsin said, her voice taking on a firmness that suggested she might not be joking. "We outsmart them." "Right," Ivan said, leaning against the wall. "Because who doesn't love playing chess against a bunch of superpowered lunatics?" "Hey, some people play chess with pigeons," Barker pointed out. "We've just got the advanced model." Outside, the noise had reached a crescendo, as if the Martian wind had decided to form an impromptu orchestra with the enhanced humans as the percussion section. It wasn't exactly the kind of symphony you'd want to buy tickets for, but it was their soundtrack for better or worse. "We've got one shot," Tamsin said, glancing at her team. They were tired, frayed at the edges, but still holding together with the kind of stubbornness that was either admirable or just plain stupid. "If we can create a bigger magnetic pulse, it might disrupt them long enough to get everyone out of here." "Big enough to fry all our circuits, you mean?" Arjun said, shaking his head. "Think the equipment'll survive that one?" "About as likely as me winning the lottery back on Earth," Ivan said, but there was a glint in his eye. "Then again, I never bought a ticket." "Optimistic as ever," Sophia chuckled. "But hey, if we're gonna go out, might as well leave a lasting impression." "On Mars," Barker added dryly, "which no one will be around to appreciate, but sure." "All right, let's rig this place," Tamsin instructed. "We'll blow out the circuits, create one massive pulse. It's risky, but it's all we've got." "Story of our lives," Ivan muttered, but he was already moving, grabbing tools and getting to work. They moved quickly, each person performing their task with the kind of speed that only came from knowing the stakes. It was a race against time and evolution. "Power grid set," Sophia said, her fingers flying over the controls. "We've got about 5 minutes before everything here turns into a very expensive paperweight." "Perfect," Arjun said, sarcasm in full bloom. "Can't wait to explain this to the boss if we survive." "If we survive," Ivan echoed, though there was a grim determination in his voice. "But at least we'll give them a hell of a show." The enhanced humans were at the door, their attempts more forceful, their impatience bleeding through the metal. Each slam felt like a countdown, ticking away what little time they had left. "Everyone ready?" Tamsin asked, taking a moment to look at each of them. They nodded, each in their own way, some with shaky smiles, others with grim resolve. "Then let's make some noise." The process was a blur of motion and noise. Sparks flew as connections were made and circuits overloaded, the air buzzing with energy. Tamsin's heart pounded in time with the frantic beeping of the monitors, a symphony of chaos orchestrated by desperation. "Here goes nothing," Barker said, flipping the final switch with a flourish. "Or everything." There was a hum, a low, ominous sound that built into a crescendo. The air crackled, the lights flickered, and for a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Then the pulse went out, a wave of energy that surged through the lab, out through the walls into the very bones of the Martian outpost. It was a gamble, a last-ditch effort, but it was all they had. The enhanced humans staggered, caught in the throes of confusion and disrupted signals. Their movements became erratic, their momentum faltering as they struggled against the unseen force. "It's working," Sophia said, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "For now," Tamsin replied, her relief tempered by caution. "But we need to move fast. This won't hold forever." They gathered what they could, essentials only, leaving behind the bulk of their equipment. It was a quick, brutal assessment of value versus necessity, a reminder that survival often required sacrifices. "Let's head to the secondary base," Ivan suggested. "Should be far enough to give us a breather, assuming this whole place doesn't go up in flames." "Always the optimist," Arjun smirked, pocketing a few choice tools. "Well, someone has to be," Ivan shot back. eyes scanning the room one last time. One by one they slipped out, the lab a testament to their fight, a fleeting monument to defiance. The corridors echoed with the sounds of distant chaos, a symphony of survival and desperation. "You know, I think I'll miss this place," Barker said, glancing back as they moved. "It has a certain charm." "In a post-apocalyptic, death-trap kind of way," Sophia replied, managing a grin. "But yeah, I get it." The journey to the secondary base was fraught with tension, each shadow a potential threat, every sound a reminder of the dangers lurking just out of sight. "Think they'll follow us?" Arjun asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Maybe," Tamsin said, "but we've bought ourselves time. And on Mars, time is the most valuable currency there is." They reached the secondary base, a modest structure tucked into the Martian landscape, less advanced but more secure than their previous location. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, at least for now. "Home sweet home," Ivan said, settling in with a sigh. "No place like it except literally anywhere else." Sophia chuckled, the sound a welcome relief amidst the heavy silence. "Well, at least we're not dead, yet." "High praise," Barker quipped, setting up their limited equipment. "But I'll take it." They worked quickly, setting up what they could, improvising where necessary. It was a new beginning of sorts, not that they'd asked for it. Tamsin stood at the entrance, watching the Martian horizon with weary eyes. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Mars was still a hostile place, and their survival was a constant question mark. "Think we'll make it?" Ivan asked, joining her. "Maybe," Tamsin said, her voice quiet but determined. "But we'll damn well try." "Good enough for me," Ivan replied, clapping her on the back. "Let's get to work." And so they did, the team coming together once more, their focus on the task ahead. It was a moment of unity in a world that sought to tear them apart, a fleeting sense of hope amidst the grim reality. As the Martian sun dipped below the horizon, they worked, their determination a beacon against the encroaching darkness. They were survivors, fighters, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. For now it was enough. But tomorrow was another day, another battle, another chance to prove themselves against a world that wanted them gone. And in that they found a strange comfort, a shared purpose that bound them together as they faced the unknown. Because on Mars there was always another fight waiting, and they were more than ready for it. The secondary base, despite its charming resemblance to a giant tin can abandoned in a sandbox, was alive with the hum of activity. Tamsin stared at the array of flickering monitors, feeling a grudging appreciation for the old tech. It was like trying to get a drunk uncle to balance on a tightrope, but at least it was trying. "Checkmate, you little bastard," Arjun muttered, poking at the scanner as if he expected it to catch fire. "Might not be reliable, but it's certainly consistent in its failures." Sophia leaned over, her eyes sharp. "Anything useful on that thing, or is it just a portable disappointment? Depends on your definition of useful," Arjun replied. "At least it hasn't exploded." Yet Tamsin smirked, turning back to her own monitor. "Small victories, folks. Let's not get greedy." Ivan, lounging against a console with the air of a man contemplating his own mortality, spoke up. "You ever stop to think that maybe Mars just doesn't want us here? Like we're the party crashers who didn't bring beer. Or maybe it's just allergic to bullshit," Sophia chimed in, grinning. "In which case we're all doomed." Barker approached, a data tablet in hand, grimace firmly in place. "Got some good news, bad news for you, spill it," Tamsin said, not taking her eyes off the screen where numbers danced like caffeinated ants. "Good news is I found a way to amplify the magnetic pulse. Increase the range and duration by about 50%. That's a hell of an improvement," Ivan said, straightening up. "And the bad news is we're gonna need a power source big enough to fry Mars' remaining circuits," Barker explained. "And unless someone's got a pocket reactor stashed away, we're looking at a one-way trip." "Great. Just what I wanted," Sophia said. "A suicide mission. Without the posthumous medals." Tamsin paused, taking in the room. "We've been here before, and we've pulled through." "What's a little self-destructive mission among friends?" Ivan chuckled, a low, mirthless sound. We've got a real talent for walking into bad situations with nothing but a grimace and a prayer. Hell of a calling card, Arjun said. Next thing you know, we'll be selling t-shirts. Focus, Tamsin said, her voice cutting through the banter. If we're doing this, we need to rally every last human in this place. We'll need all hands on deck. Sophia cracked her knuckles, a gesture more comforting than threatening. We've got a few lingering in the lower levels. Most of them just as unlucky and desperate as us. Sounds like a family reunion, Barker muttered, his eyes fixed on the data tablet. Hopefully, they're in a mood to cooperate. Got any better ideas? Ivan asked, eyebrows arching. Do I ever? Barker shot back, the corners of his lips twitching into a brief smile. Tamsin stood, feeling the weight of the moment settle onto her shoulders like an unwanted cloak. Let's get this over with. Round them up, give them the choice. They can join us or they can huddle here and hope for a miracle. Sounds fair, Sophia said, heading for the corridor. And if they choose to stay, then they're on their own when Mars goes up like a birthday cake with too many candles, Arjun said. The group moved through the secondary base's narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing off the metallic walls. It was a march of desperation, but there was no room for hesitation. Not now. As they descended to the lower levels, the air grew thick with tension and the faint smell of burned circuits. The lingering humans, a ragtag ensemble of engineers, scientists, and the occasional lost soul, looked up with weary eyes as Tamsin and her team approached. There's the cavalry, muttered one of the engineers, a wiry man with a beard that looked like it could house a family of small rodents. Or what passes for it, Tamsin replied, crossing her arms. We've got a plan. It's risky, dangerous, and almost certainly going to be the end of us. But it's also the only way we've got a shot. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It wasn't panic, not quite. More like the realization that the nightmare hadn't ended and the wake-up call was overdue. Why should we trust you? Asked a woman from the back, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Because I'm the only one stupid enough to come up with a plan that might work, Tamsin shot back. And because you've got nothing to lose but your miserable existence on a planet that wants you dead. Fair point, the woman conceded. Ivan stepped forward. Look, we could die hiding down here, waiting for the enhanced freaks to tear us apart, or we could die trying to make a difference. I know which one I'm picking. The room was silent, the kind of silence that comes before a storm or an epiphany. What do you need from us? Asked the wiry engineer. Whatever tech skills you've got left, any resources you can scrounge up, Tamsin replied. And enough bravery to face down a planet full of hostile parasites. A reluctant murmur of agreement rippled through the group, interspersed with a few nods and resigned sighs. It was hardly a rousing endorsement, but it was enough. Then let's get to work, Tamsin said, turning on her heel and heading back up the corridor. We've got a planet to save, or at least a few square miles of it. The team worked like a well-oiled, slightly dysfunctional machine, each person playing their part with a blend of expertise and desperation. Sophia coordinated the setup of the amplified pulse generator, while Arjun tinkered with the scanner, trying to squeeze some semblance of reliability out of it. Ivan and Barker worked on the power grid, a task that involved more swearing and sparking wires than was probably safe. Tamsin, for her part, moved between them like a conductor of chaos, directing the symphony of survival. Think this is gonna work? Ivan asked, glancing up from the tangled mess of wires and circuits. Depends on your definition of work, Tamsin replied, a hint of a smile on her lips. But hey, it can't be worse than what we've been through, Barker huffed, wiping sweat from his brow. Famous last words. The tension in the room was palpable, a living thing that pressed down on them like the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. But there was also a flicker of hope, a stubborn belief that maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. All right, folks, Tamsin said, her voice rising above the din of activity. We're about to make history, one way or another, or become a cautionary tale for future idiots, Arjun added, his fingers flying over the controls with practiced speed. Let's aim for history, Sophia said, a grin playing on her lips. It's got a better ring to it. With the preparations complete, the team gathered, a motley crew of survivors standing against the odds. It was a moment of unity, a shared resolve that bound them together in the face of impending doom. Here goes nothing, Barker said, his hand hovering over the final switch. Or everything, Ivan corrected, his eyes meeting Tamsin's with a mixture of hope and resignation. And with a single, decisive motion, Barker flipped the switch, his actions setting into motion a chain of events that none of them could predict. The pulse went out, a surge of energy that spread through the base like wildfire, racing towards the sky. It was a gambit, an act of defiance against a world that seemed determined to crush them beneath its rusty heel. For a moment, nothing happened. The air was still, the silence oppressive. Then the world erupted into chaos. The enhanced humans, caught in the grip of the magnetic pulse, staggered and fell, their movements erratic and disjointed. The parasites within them writhed, disrupted by the surge of energy that tore through their systems. "It's working," Sophia breathed, her voice a mixture of wonder and disbelief. "Don't get too comfortable," Tamsin warned. "We've only bought ourselves time." The team watched as the pulse continued to ripple outwards, disrupting the very fabric of the Martian landscape. It was a temporary reprieve, a momentary victory in a battle that was far from over. "Think we've got a shot now?" Ivan asked, his gaze fixed on the monitors. "Maybe," Tamsin said, her voice quiet but resolute. "It's a start, at least." And on Mars, a start is more than we ever hoped for. The team nodded, their faces reflecting a blend of exhaustion and determination. They had survived against all odds, but the fight was far from over. "Let's get ready," Tamsin said, her focus shifting to the task ahead. "We'll need to move soon before they regroup." The team dispersed, each person moving with renewed purpose, their actions driven by the flicker of hope that burned within them. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now. The Martian sandstorm outside the secondary base was as relentless as a toddler on a sugar high, dust swirling angrily about like a cosmic tantrum. Inside, Tamsin glanced at the monitors. Their flickering dance felt like a countdown she couldn't quite see but could definitely feel. Time was short, much like their tempers. Sophia, her sharp eyes locked on the pulse generator, muttered, "This thing better do more than make them trip over their own feet. Otherwise, we're the ones on a kamikaze mission." "Relax," Ivan said, lounging against a console as if he were back in an Earth bar with a cold beer instead of a tangled mess of wires and circuits. "Worst case, we die and become stars in some alien's grim bedtime story." Arjun snorted, fiddling with the scanner. "I'd rather haunt Mars." Nothing like messing with an entire planet's Wi-Fi as a hobby. Tamsin couldn't help but chuckle. Grim humor was all they had left. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Now, remember the plan. We hit them hard, short, and sweet. We can't afford a long goodbye." Barker, hovering over his data tablet like a vulture eyeing roadkill, tapped a few buttons. "Power's ready. Just say the word, and we'll send those freaks a little Martian love note." Tamsin straightened, pulling on her suit with the care of a gambler shuffling cards. "All right, team. This is it. We're not just doing this for us. We're doing it for every poor soul that's ever been stuck on this red rock." They moved out, a ragtag band of misfits united by nothing more than a shared desire to live to see another day. The corridors of the base seemed smaller now, like the walls were closing in, each step echoing with a finality that they all felt but none dared speak of. The lower levels were quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm or the moment right before someone says something monumentally stupid. Tamsin could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, some filled with hope, others with resignation. "Hey Tamsin," Sophia called. "Got any last words for us, or are you saving those for the highlight reel?" Tamsin paused in the doorway, glancing back at them with a wry smile. "Just remember, if we pull this off, drinks are on me." Sophia laughed, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. "Now that's motivation. As they reached the outer doors, Tamsin took a deep breath, the recycled air of the base tasting almost sweet compared to the metallic bite of the Martian atmosphere. Okay, folks, showtime. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the barren, rust-red landscape beyond. Wind howled against their suits, particles of sand stinging like tiny needles. Ahead, the enhanced humans loomed, their forms distorted by the parasites writhing within them. They moved with a jerky, unsettling grace, a mockery of humanity. "Charming audience," Arjun quipped, adjusting the scanner. "Real test of nerves." Ivan tightened his grip on his weapon, a grim determination etched into his features. "Let's make sure they get the encore they deserve." Sophia powered up the pulse generator, a low hum resonating through the air, promising chaos and disruption. Ready to rock their world or at least give them a mild panic attack, Tamsin nodded, her hand hovering over the control. "On my mark. Remember, stay sharp and keep it quick." The team spread out, a well-practiced dance of chaos and precision. Tamsin felt the adrenaline course through her veins, sharpening her senses and dulling the fear that clawed at the edges of her mind. 3, 2, 1, now, she shouted, slamming her hand down on the control. The pulse went out, a shockwave of energy that surged through the air, distorting reality with its sheer force. The enhanced humans staggered, their movements becoming erratic, their screams of rage cut short as the parasites within them convulsed violently. "Looks like we've got their attention," Ivan remarked, firing off a shot that took down one of the staggering figures. "Good," Tamsin replied, ducking behind a boulder as a wild shot whizzed past her. "Let's give them something to remember us by." The battle was a blur of sound and motion, a symphony of violence and desperation. The enhanced humans were strong, their movements fueled by rage and the alien power that coursed through them. But Tamsin and her team were smarter, their actions driven by the need to survive, the knowledge that this was their only shot. Arjun's scanner whirred, a high-pitched whine that cut through the chaos. "Tamsin, I've got a bead on a cluster of those parasites. They're reacting to the pulse." "Then let's make sure they don't get a chance to regroup," Sophia called, taking aim and firing with cold precision. Barker, still clutching his data tablet, directed the energy bursts with an air of a man playing a deadly game of chess. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Let's see how they like these apples." The enhanced humans were struggling, their movements becoming more disjointed, the power that had once seemed unstoppable now faltering under the relentless assault. "Keep pushing," Tamsin shouted, her voice hoarse but determined. "We've got them on the ropes." The team pressed their advantage, each one of them a cog in the machine of survival, their actions fueled by the grim hope that maybe, just maybe, they could win this. Ivan, his face set in grim resolve, moved up to Tamsin. "They're falling back. Looks like they're not so tough without their parasites playing puppet master." "Good," Tamsin replied, breathing heavily. "Let's make sure they don't get a chance to recover." The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning circuits. The enhanced humans, once terrifying in their power, were now little more than flailing figures, their strength sapped by the relentless pulse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the enhanced humans fell, their bodies twitching helplessly in the dust. The battlefield was silent save for the ragged breathing of Tamsin and her team. "We did it," Sophia breathed, a wild grin spreading across her face. "We actually did it." Arjun let out a whoop of triumph, the scanner falling silent in his hands. "Not bad for a bunch of misfits." Ivan, still catching his breath, gave Tamsin a weary smile. "Looks like we might live to see another day after all." Tamsin nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. "Yeah, we did it." The team gathered, a battered but victorious group standing amid the wreckage of their battle. They had won against all odds, and now the future was theirs to shape. "Well, what do you know?" Barker said, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "We're not dead yet," Tamsin replied, a laugh escaping her. "But let's not push our luck. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." The others nodded, their faces reflecting a shared sense of purpose. They had faced the worst Mars could throw at them and emerged victorious. Now it was up to them to make sure it stayed that way. "All right," Tamsin said, her voice firm but hopeful. "Let's get back to the base and figure out what comes next." The team turned, leaving the battlefield behind. The storm had passed, both outside and within, and as they walked, Tamsin felt a flicker of hope take root in her chest. They had survived. They had won. For now, that was enough. The sandstorm had settled, and so had the dust of their little skirmish. Back at the secondary base, the team gathered around a table that was suspiciously stable. Considering everything else spent most of its time vibrating with malice or collapsing for no apparent reason. The place was a mess, a battered amalgamation of old tech and even older spirits, but it was home, at least for now. Tamsin leaned back in her chair, the kind with a dubious number of legs, and surveyed her ragtag band of survivors. They had the look of people who just realized the roller coaster they jumped on was missing a few rails. Yet beneath the exhaustion there was a flicker of something else. Hope. Nah, probably just gas. "All right, folks," she started, smacking the table for emphasis, which resulted in an unsettling creak. "Let's take stock. What's left standing? What's kaput? And how many of those things did we actually take down?" Ivan, who seemed more at ease now that he was back in the realm of sarcastic banter rather than life-or-death combat, shrugged. "Enough to make them think twice about crashing our next party, I'd say. Not that we're counting, are we?" Barker, ever the data hound, looked up from his tablet. "I'd say we managed to send a good couple dozen back to whatever hell spawned them. Not bad for a day's work in hell's own backyard." Sophia, tapping a mechanical rhythm on the pulse generator with a wrench, added, "Provided the generator's not fried, I'd call that a win." "Barely. Like if winning was a game you played blindfolded and drunk." Arjun, still fiddling with his scanner, chimed in, "It's funny. I always imagined my death would involve something a bit more dignified than dying on Mars, like slipping on a banana peel or something." "Yeah. Well," Tamsin replied, "I'm sure we'll find a way to make it even less dignified than that. For now, let's focus on keeping that particular dream at bay. We need to start patching things up around here." She tapped a finger against her temple, as if trying to jump-start her brain into coming up with a plan that didn't involve immediate doom. "We'll need to reinforce the quarantine zone. Those parasites are like bad pop songs. You think you've gotten rid of them, but they keep coming back in new and awful remixes." Ivan leaned back, balancing his chair with the ease of a man who had spent far too much time tempting fate. "Reckon we've got the grit to rebuild? Or are we just biding our time until the next wave?" "We rebuild," Tamsin said firmly. "Whether we've got the grit or just sand in our teeth, we keep going. I'm not ready to let those freaks turn this planet into their own dystopian theme park." The group collectively nodded, each person mulling over what rebuilding meant. On Mars, where everything was either trying to kill you or had already succeeded with someone else, rebuilding was less about grand designs and more about duct tape and desperation. "So what's the plan, fearless leader?" Sophia asked, her tone somewhere between genuine inquiry and playful goading. Tamsin scratched her chin, feeling the grit of sand and the weight of responsibility. "First, we make sure the quarantine holds. Then we patch up the pulse generator and keep one eye on the monitors for any sign of life, or unlife. Babysitting malfunctioning tech and potentially hostile environments," Ivan said. "Just like home, minus the oxygen and basic human comforts." "Come on, you love it," Arjun teased. "This is the kind of vacation you can really brag about." "Just imagine the stories you can tell back home, assuming we ever get back home." "True," Ivan retorted. "But I'd swap 1,000 Martian sunsets for a single, overpriced Earth cocktail." "All right, let's get to it," Tamsin interrupted, standing up and immediately regretting the sudden motion as her head spun. "Sophia, you and Barker keep fiddling with the generator. Ivan, Arjun, see what you can salvage from the old tech. There's bound to be something still useful in that junkyard. I'll be on the monitors." The team dispersed, each person going about their assigned tasks. For a place so small, the base had a remarkable number of things to fix, adjust, and swear at, which they did with gusto. Sophia found herself elbow-deep in wires, muttering under her breath. Every time I think I've got this thing figured out, it decides to play hard to get. Honestly, I've had healthier relationships with toaster ovens. Barker, not one to pass up on a quip, said, at least with a toaster. You know when things get heated. It's intentional. Arjun and Ivan, meanwhile, were knee-deep in the remnants of what might have once been sophisticated equipment, but now looked like the aftermath of a particularly destructive toddler's playtime. Think any of this junk will actually work? Arjun asked, holding up what appeared to be the remains of a sophisticated multi-tool, now just a handle with a determination to not be useful. Ivan squinted at a half-melted circuit board. Sure, if you believe in miracles. Or if you're really good at pretending. Back at the monitors, Tamsin watched the screens flicker with the kind of optimism that a half-dead horse might feel about its future as a racehorse. False hope was still hope, right? The day dragged on, punctuated by the occasional burst of foul language and the smell of something burning, not always intentionally. By the time the artificial night cycle rolled in, the team was exhausted, but the base was a little more functional and their spirits a little less battered. Gathered once more around the creaky table, they looked like a group that had been to hell and back and were just waiting on their luggage to catch up. Well, folks, Tamsin said, her voice a rough whisper, we're not dead and this base hasn't fallen apart yet. I call that a win. Sophia raised an imaginary toast to not being dead yet. It's the little victories, here, Ivan said, raising a cup that likely contained something far less celebratory than alcohol. I'll drink to that. They clinked their makeshift cups together, a small, solemn celebration of their survival against all odds. It was a moment of camaraderie, of shared struggle, and a bond forged in adversity. Or maybe it was just exhaustion making them sentimental. Tamsin leaned back, letting her eyes close for a moment. The weight of leadership sat heavy on her shoulders, but it was a weight shared by her team, each bearing their own burdens in this desolate landscape. Tomorrow, we keep pushing, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. We'll find a way to make this place our own. Not just a place to survive, but to live. The others nodded, a silent agreement in their eyes. They had come too far, faced too much to give up now. Mars was a harsh, unforgiving place, but it was also a place of opportunity, of potential. If they could just hold on, maybe they could carve out a future here. For now, though, they would take the night to rest, to recharge. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own fights. But tonight, they had earned a reprieve. As the base settled into a rare moment of peace, the team found solace in each other's presence, the quiet camaraderie a balm against the harshness of their reality. They were a team, a family of sorts, and they would face whatever came next together. And maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to turn this rusty, inhospitable planet into a home. The lights dimmed, casting the base in soft shadows, and one by one they drifted off to sleep, each dreaming of a future where humanity could thrive on Mars. In the quiet, as Tamsin's eyes fluttered shut, she felt a flicker of hope take root in her chest. They had survived. They had won. And tomorrow they would fight to keep it that way. For now, that was more than enough.